The celestial dawn drifted silently through the void, its crystalline hull catching the distant light of binary stars. Captain Zaran stood on the observation deck, his elongated limbs folded in contemplation, as he gazed upon the diplomatic station that hung like a geometric jewel against the cosmic backdrop. For 3 centuries, the Galactic Confederation had maintained order through logic precision and the complete suppression of emotional impulse. Yet today, they were about to encounter a species that reportedly operated on the most dangerous force imaginable, raw, unfiltered emotion. The humans of Earth had been discovered only months ago, their primitive radio signals betraying their existence to the Confederation's deep space monitors. Initial probe data suggested a species of remarkable technological potential, but disturbing emotional volatility. The debate among the Confederation Council had been intense. Some argued for immediate containment. Others, like Zaran, believed in the value of cautious observation and potential integration. Captain First Officer Lyra's voice carried the crisp efficiency that marked all Zalathi communications. The human delegation has arrived at the neutral station. Ambassador Lily is requesting to begin the formal proceedings. Zaran turned, his silver eyes reflecting the starlight. Maintain distance, but ensure our sensors are recording everything. I want a complete analysis of their behavioral patterns, especially any emotional fluctuations. The diplomatic station, a marvel of joint Confederation engineering, had been specifically designed for first contact scenarios. Its neutral atmosphere could accommodate the physiological requirements of dozens of species, while its sensors could monitor everything from heart rate to pheromone emissions. As Zaran made his way to the main conference chamber, he reflected on the briefings he'd received about human behavior. The species apparently leaked emotional information through facial expressions, vocal intonations, and, most bizarrely, through the secretion of a salty fluid from their optical organs when experiencing certain emotional states. The main conference chamber was stark in its geometric perfection, with representatives from 7 different Confederation species seated around an hexagonal table that seemed to float in midair. Admiral Valor, the grizzled Corvanian military leader, had positioned himself directly across from where the human delegation would sit. His 4 arms were crossed in a display of skepticism that transcended species boundaries. I still maintain that this is a mistake. Valor muttered, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the chamber's translation matrix. Emotional species have historically proven unstable. The Feirathi Wars began because of an emotional outburst over a perceived insult. The Feirathi were exterminated 3 millennia ago, Dr. Nix interjected, adjusting her Zarathi spectacles. Perhaps their extinction suggests that emotional suppression, not emotional expression, leads to survival. Before Valor could respond, the chamber's doors dilated to admit the human delegation. Zaran felt his breath catch an emotional response he immediately suppressed as he got his first direct look at the beings that had caused such controversy throughout the Confederation. They were smaller than expected, their movements fluid and organic, rather than the precise calculated motions of Confederation citizens. Ambassador Lily stepped forward, her biomass distribution suggesting maturity among her species, though her skin remained relatively unwrinkled compared to truly ancient beings. She wore simple garments in earth tones, a stark contrast to the complex ceremonial robes of the Confederation delegates. Honored beings of the Galactic Confederation. She began, her voice carrying harmonics that the translation matrix struggled to render properly. I am Ambassador Lily Harrison, speaking for the people of Earth. We come in peace, seeking understanding and cooperation. The formalities proceeded as expected. Documents were exchanged through holographic interfaces, territorial boundaries were discussed, and technological sharing protocols were outlined. Zaran found himself studying the humans intently, noting how their facial features shifted constantly, expressing minute emotional variations that would have been considered severe psychological instability in any Confederation citizen. It was during the discussion of trade agreements that everything changed. Ambassador Lily had been explaining Earth's agricultural capabilities when her voice suddenly wavered. Her breathing became irregular, and then, to the horror of every being in the chamber, clear fluid began leaking from her eyes. The reaction was immediate and catastrophic. Admiral Valor leaped to his feet, all four hands reaching for weapons that weren't there. The Kelthari delegate began emitting high-pitched alarm calls, while the Yorthak representative started backing toward the nearest exit. "Security alert!" Valor shouted. "The human is experiencing system failure." But it was Dr. Nix who provided the most disturbing analysis. "Captain, my readings indicate this isn't system failure. This is intentional secretion. She's doing this deliberately." The chamber erupted in chaos. Confederation protocol had no provisions for dealing with intentional bodily fluid secretion during diplomatic proceedings. Several delegates began arguing that this was either a biological attack or a severe breach of protocol warranting immediate termination of talks. Through it all, Ambassador Lily continued to leak the clear fluid, now bringing her hands up to her eyes in what appeared to be either an attempt to stop the flow or perhaps to direct it. Her fellow human delegates remained remarkably calm, one even reaching out to place a hand on her shoulder, a gesture that caused several Confederation members to flinch at the casual physical contact. "I apologize." Lily finally managed, her voice thick with an emotional quality that made the translation matrix emit warning sounds. "I've just received word from Earth. My daughter has given birth to her first child. I'm sorry I couldn't control my joy." The silence that followed was deafening. Zaran felt something shift in his understanding, a crack in the logical framework he'd used to interpret the universe for 3 centuries of life. The humans weren't experiencing system failure. They weren't attacking. They were celebrating. You secrete fluids when experiencing positive emotions. Dr. Nix asked, her scientific curiosity overriding her cultural conditioning. "Tears can accompany many emotions," another human delegate explained. "Joy, sorrow, frustration, even anger. They're not under conscious control most of the time." Admiral Valor's expression of disgust was visible across all his facial features. "How do you function as a society when you cannot control your emotional secretions? How do you make rational decisions?" It was then that Zaran noticed something that would haunt him for cycles to come. As Ambassador Lily wiped away her tears, her expression shifted. The joy remained, but it was now tinged with something deeper, more complex. When she looked up at the assembled Confederation delegates, there was a sadness in her eyes that seemed to encompass not just personal emotion, but something far greater. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "that's exactly why our species has something yours might need." The formal proceedings were suspended, but Zaran couldn't stop thinking about those words. As the human delegation was escorted to guest quarters aboard the station, he found himself reviewing the sensor data from their arrival. Hidden in the standard diplomatic baggage were technologies that their preliminary scans couldn't fully analyze, devices that seemed to interact with bioelectric fields in ways that defied conventional physics. That night, as the celestial dawn maintained its orbit, Zaran called for a private meeting with his senior staff. The conference room felt colder. Somehow, the perfect geometric lines suddenly seeming sterile rather than elegant. "I've been reviewing our xenopsychological databases." Dr. Nix reported, her usual clinical detachment slightly strained. "Human emotional responses appear to be far more complex than our initial assessments suggested. They don't just experience emotions, they seem to use them as a form of information processing." First Officer Lyra ever practical cut to the military implications. "Admiral Valor has requested permission to board the station with a full security detail. He believes the humans are concealing weapons." "Are they?" Zaran asked. "That's what's disturbing, Captain. Our scans indicate they're carrying devices that could be weapons, but they operate on principles we don't understand. They seem to amplify and direct bioelectric fields rather than conventional energy or projectile systems." Zaran stared at the holographic display showing the human delegation's quarters. Ambassador Lily stood at a viewport, apparently just looking at the stars. No purpose, no data gathering, just observation. I want to speak with her, privately. The meeting took place in a smaller chamber, just Zaran and Ambassador Lily, separated by a table that seemed vast in its simplicity. The human's eyes were still slightly red from her earlier emotional display, a visual reminder of the biological chaos that seemed to define her species. You wanted to understand, she said before he could speak. I can see it in your expression, even though your people have spent centuries learning to suppress such things. Human emotional responses present complications for Confederation protocol. Zaran replied carefully. Your secretion of fluids during the proceedings caused significant disruption. Lily smiled, another expression that conveyed multiple layers of meaning through mere muscle movement. Captain, may I ask you something personal? Personal. When did you last feel joy, real, uncontrolled, overwhelming joy? The question hit him like a physical blow. He began to access his memory files, searching for instances of emotional response, only to realize how thoroughly trained he was to suppress or immediately analyze away any feeling that arose. I don't see the relevance. 3 cycles ago, the Vraxian Empire invaded the Outer Rim. Confederation forces fought bravely but suffered heavy casualties due to the Vraxians' new phase-shifting technology. Logical analysis of their tactics was insufficient to counter their advantages. Do you remember the reports from that campaign? Zaran nodded, uncertain where this was leading. The turning point came when Commander Zeth's ship was destroyed along with all hands. The survivors reported that witnessing their leader's sacrifice didn't just motivate them logically, it made them angry. That anger, that emotional response, led them to take risks that pure logic would have rejected. Those risks broke the Vraxian advance. Emotional decision-making is inefficient, Zaran protested. It leads to errors in judgment. Does it? Lily leaned forward, and Zaran noticed that her hands were trembling slightly. Captain, I need to tell you something. My tears weren't just about my daughter. They were about something else too. She gestured, and the room's display activated, showing a star chart of the local galactic region. Red markers appeared throughout the outer rim, spreading inward like an infection. The same Vraxian forces that attacked the Confederation have been studying human space for months. They've learned about our emotional responses, and they've developed something we're calling the empathy net. A weapon that can detect, amplify, and weaponize emotional states on a massive scale. Zaran's logical mind raced through the implications. That's impossible. Emotions are internal biological processes. Are they? Lily activated another display showing complex mathematical equations that seem to describe patterns in bioelectric fields. For centuries, humanity has known that emotions generate measurable electromagnetic signatures. What we've discovered is that these signatures can be detected, recorded, and even transmitted. The horror of understanding began to dawn on Zaran. The devices you brought can create an empathy field that links the emotional states of everyone within its range. Imagine feeling the fear of everyone around you, amplified and focused, into a weapon that can paralyze opposing forces through sheer emotional overload. But why bring this to us? Why reveal this capability? Ambassador Lily was silent for a long moment, her hands clasped tightly together. Because the Vraxians are coming, and they have something similar. The tears you saw today weren't just joy and sorrow, Captain. They were preemptive grief mourning for the billions who will die when they arrive, and for the choice we'll have to make about using this technology ourselves. Zaran felt something unprecedented, a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. How long do we have? Their advance fleet will arrive within 10 standard cycles. Their main force, perhaps 50. And you believe this emotion weapon can stop them? Captain, the Vraxians suppress emotions even more completely than your people do. They've engineered themselves to feel nothing but the drive to expand and consume. But that very suppression makes them vulnerable to forced emotional experience. We've run simulations. Exposure to raw human emotional data through the empathy net doesn't just confuse them, it breaks their minds. Zoran stood and walked to the viewport where earlier he'd seen Lily simply looking at stars. Now he understood she hadn't been merely observing, she'd been mourning, celebrating, hoping, and fearing, all at once, experiencing the full spectrum of human emotional complexity as she contemplated the future of the galaxy. "This changes everything," he murmured. "Does it?" Lily joined him at the viewport. "Your people have built an incredible civilization through logic and emotional control. But sometimes, Captain, the universe requires us to feel our way through the darkness." The days that followed were unlike anything in Confederation history. Zoran found himself at the center of a debate that would reshape galactic civilization. Admiral Valori argued forcefully for either containing the humans or destroying them before their emotional weapon technology could spread. Other factions wanted to study the technology, seeing it as a potential solution not just to the Vraxian threat, but to other galactic problems. Dr. Nix worked tirelessly with human scientists attempting to understand the fundamental principles behind emotional field manipulation. Her reports grew increasingly disturbing as she realized the implications of what humans had discovered. "Captain," she reported during one of their strategy sessions, "human emotions appear to be quantum entangled across individuals. When one human experiences a strong emotion, others in their social network experience resonance effects even across vast distances. The empathy net doesn't create this connection. It amplifies something that already exists naturally." "Are you saying that humans are naturally telepathic?" "Not telepathic in the traditional sense, but there's definitely some form of emotional field interaction that we've never encountered before. And more disturbing preliminary tests suggest that prolonged exposure to human emotional fields can create similar entanglement effects in other species." Zoran absorbed this information with growing unease. The logical part of his mind rejected the implications, but increasingly, he found himself paying attention to sensations and reactions he'd spent centuries suppressing. It was during the third day of negotiations that everything changed. Zoran was reviewing tactical data when First Officer Lyra burst into his quarters, an unprecedented breach of protocol that immediately signaled crisis. "Captain, you need to see this," she said. Her usual composure cracked. "The humans just received a transmission from Earth." In the main conference chamber, the human delegation had gathered around a holographic display. Ambassador Lily's face had gone pale, and several other delegates were exhibiting the clear signs of emotional distress that Zoran was learning to recognize. "The Vraxian advance fleet has been detected entering the Sol system," one of the human technicians reported. "They'll reach Earth in 72 hours. 3 cycles ahead of schedule." Admiral Valor growled, his tactical mind immediately calculating the implications. "Our defensive preparations aren't complete." But it was what happened next that truly shattered Zoran's understanding of his place in the universe. Ambassador Lily looked directly at him, tears streaming down her face, but not tears of fear or despair. These were tears of determination, of angry resolve, of protective fury that seemed to fill the entire chamber with an almost physical presence. "Captain Zoran," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made his spine tingle. "We need to make a choice. All of us. The empathy net can stop the Vraxians, but using it will change everything. Once emotional fields are weaponized, there's no going back. The galaxy will have to decide what kind of civilization it wants to be." "What are you asking?" "I'm asking you to feel, Captain. For just one moment, stop analyzing and let yourself experience what your logical mind has been suppressing for centuries. Because the choice we make here can't be purely logical. It has to come from something deeper." Zoran stood there surrounded by beings from across the galaxy, and for the first time in 300 years, he stopped fighting the sensations that rose from somewhere deep in his consciousness. The fear of the Vraxian invasion, the awe at human emotional complexity, the protective instinct for the Confederation's billion worlds. the curiosity about what lay beyond the borders of pure logic, and something else, a feeling he didn't have words for watching Ambassador Lily's tears of fierce determination. It was like admiration but deeper, like respect but more personal, like, "We call it empathy," Lily said softly, apparently seeing something in his expression. The ability to feel what others feel, to understand not just their logic, but their pen, their goy, their hope. And this empathy, it can be transmitted, shared. Dr. Nix stepped forward, her scientific excitement overriding diplomatic protocol. "Captain, the human technology doesn't just transmit emotions. It creates genuine empathetic connections. I've been monitoring the bioelectric fields in this chamber, and your emotional resonance patterns have been synchronizing with the humans since the first day." "What does that mean?" "It means you've been feeling what they feel to some degree since this began. The question is, what do we do with that ability?" The debate that followed raged for hours. Confederation doctrine was clear: emotional decision-making led to chaos, to war, to the collapse of civilized order, but the Vraxian fleet was approaching Earth and conventional weapons had proven insufficient against their technology. It was First Officer Lyra who finally voiced what everyone was thinking. "If we use this emotion weapon against the Vraxians, how do we ensure it isn't used against us in the future?" "You can't," Ambassador Lily answered honestly. "That's the price of this knowledge. Once the galaxy knows that emotions can be weaponized, the balance of power changes forever. But consider the alternative. The Vraxians have already shown they'll use any weapon against civilian populations. At least with the empathy net, we have a defensive tool that doesn't require destroying entire star systems." Admiral Valor slammed his fist on the table. "You're asking us to abandon everything the Confederation stands for. 3,000 years of logical governance thrown away for the whims of emotional chaos." "No," Zaran said quietly, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. "She's asking us to evolve." The silence that followed was profound. Zaran could feel the eyes of every delegate on him, but more than that, he could sense their emotions. Confusion, fear, hope, anger, curiosity, a swirling mixture that somehow clarified rather than muddied his thinking. "Admiral," he continued, "logic brought us to where we are. But logic alone clearly isn't sufficient for where we need to go. The Vraxians are proof of what happens when logic becomes coldness, when efficiency becomes cruelty. And humans are proof of what happens when emotion rules over reason," Valor shot back. "Are they?" Zaran asked. Ambassador Lily knew she was revealing her species' greatest weapon to potential enemies. She did it anyway because she believed cooperation was more important than advantage. That's not emotional chaos, that's emotional wisdom. Dr. Nix suddenly straightened, her attention captured by incoming data. "Captain, I'm receiving reports from the Confederation border stations. Vraxian forces are mobilizing across multiple sectors, not just toward Earth. This isn't just an invasion, it's a coordinated assault on both human space and Confederation territory. They're forcing our hand," Lily realized. "They want us to use the empathy net. They want to study how it affects their forces so they can develop countermeasures." "Then what do you suggest?" Zaran asked. For the first time since the negotiations began, Ambassador Lily smiled, not the polite diplomatic expression he'd seen before, but something genuine and slightly predatory. "We give them exactly what they want, but not in the way they expect." The plan that emerged over the following hours was unprecedented in Confederation history. Rather than deploying the empathy net as a weapon, they would use it to create something never before attempted: a galaxy-wide, empathetic link during the final battle. Every being in the Confederation, every human on Earth linked emotionally during the confrontation, Dr. Nix explained. Her voice filled with wonder and terror in equal measure. Not controlling their emotions, but sharing them. The Vraxians will face not just our weapons, but the combined emotional resolve of trillions of conscious beings. And after Admiral Valor asked grimly. What happens to the Confederation when every citizen can feel what every other citizen feels? We become something new, Zoran answered, something that's never existed before. The preparation required was enormous. Human emotional field generators were installed throughout Confederation space, while human technicians worked with Confederation engineers to create a network capable of spanning the galaxy. Volunteers from every species submitted to testing learning to open themselves to emotional experiences they'd spent millennia suppressing. Zoran found himself working closely with Ambassador Lily during these preparations, and in quieter moments, she helped him understand the complexities of human emotional experience. It's not chaos, she explained as they watched technicians calibrating an empathy transmitter. Emotions have patterns, rhythms, purposes. Fear keeps us alive. Love binds us together. Anger motivates us to fight injustice. Even sorrow has a purpose. It helps us process loss and find meaning in sacrifice. But how do you make decisions when you feel so much? The same way you make them with logic, Captain. We gather information, consider options, and choose. The difference is our information includes how our choices make us and others feel. It doesn't replace logic, it complements it. 3 days before the Vraxian fleet reached Earth, Zarin stood on the bridge of the Celestial Dawn, now positioned at the heart of a combined Confederation human fleet unlike anything in galactic history. Ships from dozens of species floated in perfect formation, while human vessels moved between them, their organic curves contrasting with Confederation geometric precision. All stations report ready, Captain First Officer Lyra announced. Empathy net generators are online throughout the fleet. Earth confirms they're prepared to initiate galaxy-wide emotional linking on your command. Zarin nodded, then opened a channel to the entire fleet. Beings of the Confederation, humans of Earth. Today, we face an enemy that believes strength comes from emptiness, that power requires the absence of feeling. They are about to learn that our greatest strength comes not from what we suppress, but from what we share. He paused, feeling the rightness of the moment in a way that transcended logic. Activate the empathy net. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Suddenly, Zaran could feel the determination of the Confederation admirals, the fierce protective love of human parents, thinking of their children, the curiosity of scientists eager to learn even in the face of danger. The fear of young soldiers that transformed into resolve when shared with billions of others. Vraxian fleet dropping out of hyperspace, Tactical reported. 60 capital ships approaching Earth on attack vector. The enemy vessels were things of terrible beauty, crystalline structures that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, moving with perfect mechanical precision. But as the empathy net reached out toward them, something unexpected happened. The Vraxian formation faltered. Their navigation appears to be disrupted, Dr. Nix reported, her voice filled with wonder. Captain, I think our emotional fields are interfering with their neural suppression technology. What followed was unlike any battle in galactic history. Confederation and human weapons engaged the Vraxian fleet, but the real battle was happening on an emotional level. The empathy net carried not just the feelings of the Allied forces, but memories children playing on distant worlds, lovers separated by war scientists discovering new truths about the universe, artists creating beauty from chaos. To the Vraxians, who had spent millennia suppressing all emotion, the experience was devastating. Several ships simply stopped functioning, their crews overwhelmed by feelings they had no framework to process. Others retreated, unable to maintain formation in the face of such emotional intensity. But some fought on, and it was then that Zoran realized the true power of what they had created. When Confederation ships were damaged, every being in the fleet felt the loss. When human vessels were destroyed, the grief was shared across species barriers, and from that shared pain came something remarkable, a unity of purpose that transcended individual survival. Vraxian command ship is trying to retreat. Admiral Valor reported, his usual stoic demeanor cracked by the emotional intensity flowing through the net. Should we pursue? No, Zoran said, feeling the rightness of the decision, not through logic, but through a deeper understanding. Let them go. Let them carry word of what they've experienced back to their empire. As the battle ended and the empathy net remained active, Zoran found himself in the Celestial Dawn's observation lounge with Ambassador Lily. Earth hung before them, blue and white and beautiful, while the combined fleet of former strangers worked together to rescue survivors from both sides. It's not going to be easy, Lily said quietly. Living with this much feeling, this much connection, your people will struggle with it, so will mine. Probably, Zoran agreed. But look around us. How many Confederation ships are helping rescue Vraxian survivors? How many humans are working with species they'd never met before today? Logic might have won this battle, but empathy won the war. And now we learn to be something new. A galaxy where beings can feel each other's pain and joy, where decisions are made not just with minds but with hearts. It won't be perfect. It might not even be better, but it will be real in a way we've never experienced before. Ambassador Lily wiped tears from her eyes, tears of exhaustion, relief, hope, and sorrow all mixed together. You know what the most beautiful part is? Captain, those Vraxian survivors we're rescuing, they're feeling compassion for the first time in their lives. The net is still active. They can feel our concern for them, our desire to help, even though they came here to destroy us. Zoran watched the rescue operations, feeling the emotions of thousands of beings working together despite their differences. A month ago, he would have seen this as chaos, as dangerous emotionalism that threatened the logical order of society. Now he understood it differently. Do you think they'll be able to handle it? The Vraxians? Some will, others won't. Change is never easy, especially change this profound. But Captain, look at yourself. A month ago, would you have believed you could feel what you're feeling now and still function, still make good decisions? Zoran considered this, the fear, the joy, the protective instincts, the empathy, all of it flowing through him while he continued to captain his ship, analyze tactical situations, and make command decisions. If anything, the emotional input provided additional data that made his choices more complete, more nuanced. The Confederation Council is going to have questions, he said finally. The Earth Council, too. There will be those on both sides who want to shut down the empathy net. Go back to the way things were. But Captain, can you honestly say you want to go back? Do you want to return to a universe where you can't feel the joy of others, where you're isolated in your own logical thoughts? Before he could answer, First Officer Lyra appeared in the doorway. Her usual rigid posture was relaxed, and for the first time since he'd known her, she was smiling. Captain, the First Joint Confederation Human Scientific Expedition is ready to depart for the Vraxian border region. They've asked if you'd be willing to serve as expedition leader. It seems your experience with emotional integration makes you uniquely qualified. Zoran looked at Lily, who nodded encouragingly. Perhaps it's time someone taught the rest of the galaxy what humans have known all along, that feeling everything isn't a weakness. It's the only way to truly understand the universe we live in. 6 months later, Zoran stood in the Great Assembly of the Galactic Confederation, addressing delegates from hundreds of worlds. The chamber buzzed with not just voices, but emotions: concern, curiosity, hope, and yes, fear. The empathy net had become optional rather than permanent, but its effects had been permanent. Beings who had experienced true emotional connection found it difficult to return to pure logic. Honored delegates, he began feeling the attention of the assembly, not just intellectually, but emotionally. We gather today to address the future of our civilization in the wake of the empathy revolution. Some have called for a return to traditional logical governance. Others advocate for full emotional integration. I submit that both approaches miss the true lesson of our encounter with humanity." He paused, letting his words resonate through the chamber. Logic without emotion is cold efficiency that can justify any action if it serves the greater statistical good. Emotion without logic is chaos that can inspire beautiful art and terrible wars with equal ease. But logic and emotion together, that creates wisdom. Dr. Nix, now serving as the Confederation's first director of emotional sciences, stood from the human diplomatic section. "Captain Zoran speaks from experience. Our studies show that beings who have learned to integrate emotional and logical processing make more creative, more ethical, and ultimately more effective decisions than those who rely on either approach exclusively." Admiral Valor, whose military campaigns had become notably more successful after incorporating emotional intelligence training, added his support. "The Vraxian territories that have joined the Confederation have done so not because we conquered them, but because we showed them a better way to exist. They've gone from a sterile expansionist empire to a group of worlds focused on emotional and intellectual growth." As the debate continued, Zoran found himself thinking about Ambassador Lily, now serving as Earth's permanent representative to the Confederation. She had been right about so many things, but perhaps most importantly about this: the universe was far too complex, too beautiful, and too dangerous to navigate with logic alone. The resolution that passed that day established the Confederation's new governing principle, the integration doctrine. Decisions would be made using both logical analysis and emotional wisdom. Citizens were encouraged to develop both intellectual and emotional intelligence. The empathy net became a tool for understanding, rather than warfare, used to help resolve conflicts and build bridges between different species and cultures. Years passed. The galaxy changed in ways both subtle and profound. Wars became rarer, as species learned to literally feel each other's perspectives. Scientific discoveries accelerated as researchers learned to trust both their calculations and their intuitions. Art flourished as beings from different worlds shared not just techniques but emotional experiences. Zoran. Now Admiral Zoran commanded not a single ship, but an entire exploration fleet dedicated to expanding knowledge and building relationships with previously unknown species. His crew included beings from dozens of worlds, including humans who had taught them all that strength came not from suppressing what made them different, but from embracing and sharing it. Standing on the bridge of his flagship, watching a newly contacted civilization's ships approach with curiosity, rather than suspicion, he remembered that day long ago when he had first seen a human cry. At the time, it had seemed like the beginning of the end of everything he understood about the universe. Instead, it had been the beginning of everything. Ambassador Lily, now grown older, but no less formidable, had joined this particular first contact mission. She stood beside him, tears of wonder in her eyes, as they witnessed the beauty of new minds joining the galactic community. "Still think crying is inefficient, Captain?" she asked with a smile. "Admiral," he corrected gently, then considered her question. "No, I think crying might be the most efficient way the universe has found to remind us that we're alive, that we're connected, and that there's always more to feel than we ever imagined possible." Together they watched as the new species ships drew closer, and Zoran opened his heart to whatever emotions this new contact might bring. After all he had learned, that when you try to suppress what makes you feel, you risk losing what makes you truly wise. The galaxy had indeed ended on the day they saw a human cry. It had ended as a place of cold logic and emotional suppression, and been reborn as something infinitely more complex, more beautiful, and more alive. And in that transformation, every being who chose to feel had found, not chaos, but a deeper understanding of what it truly meant to be conscious in an infinite universe, filled with wonders beyond any logical equation. The stars shone brighter now, not because their fusion had changed, but because billions of hearts had learned to feel the light.